That's what kind of surprises me, though, honestly, because I think about you've got the branch situation, right?
Yeah,
Because you've got all of the different schools under one system,
yeah,
but then you've got the union complexities, you've
yeah,
got a lot of different payroll schedules that you're navigating.
yeah.
So yeah, it's just interesting.
Growing a business requires a holistic approach that extends beyond sales and marketing. This approach needs alignment among people, processes, and technologies. So if you're a business owner, operations, or finance leader looking to learn growth strategies from your peers and competitors, you're tuned into the right podcast. Welcome to the WBS Podcast, where scalable growth using business systems is our number one priority. Now, here is your host, Sam Gupta.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's show. And if you are joining for the first time, this is part of our industry series for which we meet every Tuesday at 2 p.m. Eastern. We review one vendor or the solution. And for today, we are reviewing UKG Pro. This is part of our HCM bucket. We have reviewed Dave Trust. I don't know how many you have joined so far, but I guess we have reviewed probably two of them. I believe SAP Success Factors, we have definitely done that. And Oracle Cloud HCM, those two. We have done Workday as well, but I don't know if we have done the specifics. So this is part of the same bucket. So we'll dig right into it. But before we do that, we are going to start with everybody's intros. I am going to start with my quick intro. Sam Gupta, principal at Elevate IQ. Elevate IQ is the independent ERP and digital transformation consulting firm. On that note, I'm going to move to Dave. Dave, do you want to introduce?
Yeah, thanks, Sam. Hey, everybody. My name is Dave Chrysler, and I own an operations consulting business. We're working with leaders to help them streamline operations and do some of these fun system integrations. So thanks for having me on, Sam. Always a pleasure to be here.
Okay, amazing. Thank you so much for being here, Dave. Srasta, do you want to introduce yourself next?
Yeah, thanks, Sam. Hi, my name is Shrestha Das. I'm part of the marketing team here at Elevate IQ, and I'm super excited to be here today.
Okay, amazing. Thank you so much for joining, guys. And if you're in the audience and joining for the first time, make sure you guys post your questions and comments. We are looking to hear your stories, your experiences. If you have used this system before, we typically utilize them in our insight and the reviews that we do. So your inputs are meaningful. So don't be shy. Mention your locations. Mention what you are thinking right now, so that we can provide the spotlight on you as well as on your comments. On that note, Dave, Testa, I'll start with the quick briefing of this particular solution. As we have been touching on different layers of how HCM sort of fits in the enterprise architecture, where are going to be boundaries between your ERP and HCM. I think we have touched on many different industry variables, the variables that matter for these buckets. So now UKG is going to have very interesting twist. And I'm actually going to move to the briefing slide so that we have some visual enforcement as well. So this is and Dave, you have done a lot more of these sessions, so you might be able to relate with it a little bit more, I would say. And the reason for that is because when you get into the mid market, and this solution is for mid market, the strategy of the product is going to be slightly different compared to your enterprise products. The two that we have reviewed so far, Oracle Cloud HCM, as well as your SAP Success Factors, they are primarily in the enterprise space. So when you compare the mid-market versus enterprise, one of the layers that you are going to notice across different categories, and that is consistent with this category as well, which is HCM. So the thing that you need to notice between your enterprise and mid-market is in enterprise, you are going to get far deeper technical capabilities, meaning it's going to be far more moldable as a solution, but you might not get as much pre-baked capabilities. And when I say pre-baked, meaning it is going to be either pre-integrated or you are going to have much broader capabilities that are going to be packaged as part of the suite. In some cases, we have also seen trends such as, and Dave, I don't know whether you were part of Service Power, the session that we had done. So that is the field service solution. They are also in slightly more mid-market space. And one of the unique layers that they had is they also combine managed services, okay, as part of the solution. And that's very interesting because managed services technically would fall under your services bucket, meaning if you are a software company, technically you are selling software. You are not necessarily in a services business. But some of these mid-market solutions, they also care for services, and they are going to have very unique managed services layers. And that's what you are going to see in this particular case. Especially in the ACM bucket, the managed services matter a lot. And the reason for that is because the tax compliance, especially for mid-market companies, unless they have the army of HR professionals, they cannot run their payroll, they cannot manage their payroll, because you have to keep track of taxation regulations for every single county, every single country, every single provinces that you have. That's a very heavy lift in general for the SMB companies, and that's why we see a lot more managed services players with your mid-market SEM solution, and that's the key differentiator here. So this trend you are going to see, let's say right now we are reviewing your UKG Pro, but if we review any other mid-market SEM solution, we are probably going to notice that. Other than that, the differences between your ACM and ERP are going to be very consistent with what we have seen so far with these solutions. So from the overall positioning perspective, this particular solution is positioned for mid-market, but in this particular case, the mid-market is going to be slightly different. Okay, so when you look at ERP industry, in ERP industry, the mid-market, they might say that, you know what, 50 to 100 million dollar, maybe 100 employees, 200 employees. There is no consensus between what is a real mid-market. One of the things that you are going to notice in ACM category is that the overall employee size is going to be far bigger when they define mid-market. For example, in this particular case, these companies are not going to touch companies that are not going to have at least 1,000 employees in general. Okay, otherwise ACM does not make much sense, I guess. You can probably live on a very siloed ACM software such as your Bamboo HR or Zoho or something like that. You probably don't need robust ACM capabilities. Once you get to that, 500,000, 2,000 employee point, that's when your ACM becomes slightly more handy. But again, depending upon the industry, each industry is going to be slightly different. In some cases, the ACM processes are going to be far thicker. For example, let's say if you're a staffing company, you are in people business. So your processes are going to be very, very, very different. And in that case, the ACM may have very different color and flavors, the way it is going to be for any other industries. Any comments, guys? No? Okay, so I'll keep going. So some more background here overall on this solution. So the other layer that you are going to notice between your enterprise players and the mid-market, since the employee footprint is so large, the overall, when you look at the enterprise systems, they are going to have much broader global footprint, because when you are going to get to 1,000 employees, 2,000 employees, 5,000 employees, at that time, you would require presence in many different countries. Okay, and one of the differentiators that you're going to find in mid-market solutions is they are going to be focused only in a couple of countries. In the case of your UKG Pro, they are predominantly in US and Canadian markets. If you look at their case studies, they are doing business in US and Canada. Obviously, in their marketing material, they are going to claim a lot of different countries, but this is where they are doing the majority of the business. And the reason why they are so focused on these countries is because building the regulation, building the functionality for these regulations, as well as maintaining that as laws are changing in each of these countries, is a very heavy lift. That is very, 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 very expensive. That's why these companies are trying to be slightly more focused. They are providing different colors to their solution, to their suite. So that's going to be the other differentiator. That is the overall global footprint. How many countries can the solution support? In this particular case, this is going to be probably US and Canada for UKG. UKG also has two different solutions. This one is their flagship solution. This is your UKG Pro. This is a very similar strategy as your ERP players. They are going to have slightly bigger solution and then a smaller solution for slightly smaller companies. They acquired many different solutions, I guess. They integrated a lot more as well as part of that, and that's how they created this particular suite or bucket. Previously, it was called UltiPro, and then Kronos bought it, and that's how they became UKG. I think UKG, U stands for what? UltiPro, and K is for Kronos, I believe. So that's how their new branding is, UKG. The competing technologies here are going to be your Info WFM, and that is the one that we had pointed out for SAP SuccessFactors as well. Info WFM is a very mid-market solution. Oracle HCM is very enterprise-centric solution. So again, all of the layers that we have touched for mid-market versus enterprise, they are probably going to be applicable in this case as well. When you look at Info WFM, that is going to be slightly more suite-centric. They are not going to have managed services. They are going to rely on consulting companies for managed services. So that's the distinction between your Info WFM and UKG. SAP SuccessFactors is going to be very, very, very similar to your Oracle HCM. You are not going to get managed services. Managed services you are going to get through your consulting companies, through their partner channel. That's how they are structured. Sage is kind of there in the HCM market, but not really. Very, very, very small footprint.
Yeah, that's kind of surprising that they would have something in this space with their typical size customer that they go after.
So their customer size is smaller, to be completely honest, Dave.
Do you see that as like a transition? Because we've reviewed a couple of the Sage products, and I would have definitely put that in the, I wouldn't even necessarily say a lower mid market, but just depends on how you want to define it.
Yeah.
So it's interesting that they have a solution in this space.
So again, this goes back to your industries, right? So I think construction is a unique beast in general, okay? And Sage has very large footprint in construction. And the reason why Sage is in that HCM business is because the HCM processes in industries like construction are so intertwined that you have to have HCM. Otherwise, it's going to be very patchy, siloed experience that you cannot sell your ERP. In fact, if you look at Acumatica's journey, okay? Acumatica always used to make jokes about payroll. They never wanted to get into payroll business. Like, they were like, who is going to develop payroll in 2024? Nobody. Like, nobody touches that. That's the ugly child, stepchild that nobody wanted to develop. But they ended up developing a little bit of payroll capabilities. And the reason for that is, again, because of construction. They have massive presence in construction, and there is no way you can sell ERP unless you have the HCM payroll capabilities, because again, because of all of those union workflows that are going to be embedded, intertwined with your core processes.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And even from a generalized union standpoint, not necessarily specific to construction. I mean, we've talked about this in a couple of other reviews, but there's just a lot of complexities to navigate, and you start to multiply and add zeros to your employee count, and it just becomes impossible, to do any other way. So yeah, makes total sense.
Exactly. But the real competitors, I guess, when you look at the core HCM bucket, even though these guys are going to claim that they are HCM, but there are a lot more layers that are going to be relevant in the HCM space. And that is going to be your internal capacity building, learning, benefits. ERP companies may argue that they have a little bit of benefits, but the core HR is in that recruiting, retention. Those are the bigger pain points for HR folks. That's what they care for, and those capabilities you are going to find with your Workdays of the world, Cornerstones of the world. ADP, they are primarily a payroll company. They have HCM as well, but they are primarily in the payroll business. Then Ceridian is very mid-market centric competitor, but they are going to be slightly more into your, I would say, blue collar space, slightly more industrial companies than your white collar spaces. And your UKG is going to be number one in your white collar spaces, which is going to be your companies like banking, credit unions. They use a lot. They have some unique capabilities for your branches. The way your commission structure is going to be in your branch structure, it's very different. Retail, you have issues such as your tips. How do you allocate an account for tips? These are very unique workflows and you require very unique capabilities. So that's why these guys are in those industries. And if you are going to have a generalized ACM platform like your Oracle, SAP, those are probably going to struggle in these spaces. They might have some generalized capabilities, but they are not going to have everything. And generally, they rely on partner add-ons for these industry specific capabilities. Collaborators, here you have dimensions and dimensions, and I don't know how this overlaps with the core product, to be completely honest. I think dimensions was their slightly more planning tool. That was my understanding of their dimensions, and that is definitely included as part of your UKG Pro product. But then we have also read reviews that, I mean, they are calling the older product as dimensions, so there's a little confusion there. And sometimes reviews could be all over the place as well, because those people are sort of going with their own understanding of how they understand the product. But dimensions is, in my opinion, that's slightly more planning sort of tool inside the workflow bucket, and that is going to be included with most of the enterprise tools. Whether you talk about your Oracle ACM or SAP SuccessFactors, they all are going to have the real HR planning. And in planning also, you have many different buckets. So this caters to very specific planning workflows. Again, these industries are very unique. For example, if you look at the common layers across them, when you compare banking, credit unions, hospital, healthcare, retail, consumer services, okay, so if you notice the common thread between them, one of the common thread is going to be your branches. And branch is a very unique structure, overall from the corporate architecture perspective. I don't know what is the name of that enterprise architect. Enterprise architecture is a very technical term, I guess. Maybe enterprise model. What word should I use, Dave?
Yeah, I
Structure.
mean, yeah, kind of. For me, it's just generalized business model. The other thing I'm surprised to not see on that list, and maybe it's in here, but I would think schools would be another good entity for this.
I think they are doing some business in schools, but schools have unique layers as well. They don't have as many employees, but their HCM workflows are going to be very, very, very unique. That's why if you look at the solutions that are going to be heavily penetrated in the school space, they are going to be like solutions like Unit 4. Blackboard does really well, but they don't necessarily have the HCM capabilities, I would say.
That's what kind of surprises me, though, honestly, because I think about you've got the branch situation, right?
Yeah,
Because you've got all of the different schools under one system,
yeah,
but then you've got the union complexities. You've
yeah,
got a lot of different payroll schedules that you're navigating.
yeah.
So yeah, it's just interesting. I just was thinking about that.
Yeah, no, I mean that's a great point, and I don't know. I mean, see, I have personally not seen if they have any logos for schools, to be completely honest, and
Yeah.
maybe they do. Okay, but in my mind, if I look at these school workflows, they could be slightly different because they don't have that tip structure, right? So, I mean, if you could argue that banks probably not, they are not going to have tips either.
Well, but they like to spend money. So
Exactly. So it's always interesting, with these business models. There are always going to be common layers, but again, in this particular case, the main reason is the branching, and they have very unique capabilities for those branches that we are going to review in just a second. The other complexity that is very, very, very commonly discussed is going to be seasonal workers. Seasonal workers matter even for ERP, and especially, and Dave, you might be right here, because if you look at anybody who is operating in the school business, especially school supply players, even if they are going to be distributors, they care for seasonality because they literally have business for like 2 months and they have nothing going on for 10 months. Everybody goes home. Okay. So, and now during school season, they probably are going to require, let's say, 200 employees, sometimes 500 employees. So they are going to be paying licensing for the whole year, but then they are using it only for 2 months. So seasonality is a big deal. So seasonality affects a lot of these processes as well. The managed services for tax and compliance, I think that's where the real deal is with these guys. And it's a very similar business model as you are going to see with Gusto, which is a very, very, very small payroll provider. They do a lot more in general because small businesses are not going to have all of those capabilities to be able to understand or comply with the HR processes. So they sort of make it so easy that you don't have to worry about HR compliance at all. and this is a very similar model. They are able to do that for such larger businesses. Obviously, it's hard, and that's why they are limited only in fewer countries, because there is no way anybody can manage this, in so many different countries. And that's why if you look at Gusto, I mean, they are just present in the US. They don't even have presence in Canada because it's hard. Okay, I don't have any other comments unless you guys have anything. I'll keep going here. So some more points here. The other layers that you're going to find with your smaller systems is they are going to argue that they have configurable data fields, but the layers that you're going to find with these are going to be limited. So pay attention to that. In this particular case, the small versus mid market, the mid markets are going to be slightly more customizable or configurable than your smaller systems. So typically, it is going to be the number of layers or number of folds these systems are generally going to have. How many different transactions, how many different business models that they can support. That's where the real differentiator is between these systems. Audit trail of employee changes. Now, that's a feature that you would think that every system is going to have, but that's not true. Even with ERP, it's very, very, very hard. Okay, but you require this when you are going to have the compliance processes. With HCM, you need that. I would say 70% of the ERP systems don't necessarily have audit trail. It's very, very, very hard for them to implement every single change, because that slows down the whole workflow, and they are processing much thicker transactions. So it's much harder unless they require that for the financial compliance. And the granularity that you are going to require for financial compliance is very different from your ACM. Here, you are looking at traceability at the employee level, because sometimes you are going to have the audit processes, lawsuits, whatever, that you need to be able to track at the employee level that you complied with the processes, and you have a log or trace for that to be able to show it to your regulatory bodies. The employee turnover trends, I don't know how beneficial they are going to be for smaller companies, to be completely honest. They are probably relevant for larger companies. The smaller companies are probably going to know. So I don't know if there is really a need for this in the mid market, but these guys seem to have that. The notification technology is very unique as well, and we have seen a lot of layers with the notification technology and compliance around that. If you are going to be in any businesses that are going to be slightly more facility centric, okay, they go through even much more stricter, I guess, emergency notification process. That is not going to be your HR laws. These are going to be very different laws that you have to comply with, and typically for that you have the emergency notification platforms, and typically they are controlled by telcos. Uh, so, so let's not get there, because here the only thing these guys are trying to do is this is the plain employee communication. This does not even include your customer vendor communication, because sometimes you might have customer vendor on your premises depending upon how your facility is structured. So the companies that are going to be in real estate business model, for example, let's say you have some of the not-for-profit and they host their customers inside their premises, then they need to communicate with their customers as well. So that becomes a very, very, very different process overall. Sometimes they might have vendors inside their premises as well. So again, that's a very different communication model, and for that you have different tools. Here, the only thing you are doing is you are doing communication with your employees regarding benefits, training, retention, from that aspect, and you are probably doing some surveys. Now, you would think that org chart is easy. Org chart could be very complicated as well in general, especially if you're looking at companies that are going to have 5,000 employees. Just tracing those 5,000 employees in a tree structure, it's a massive lift for a lot of systems, and they don't have that. And here we are talking about making changes into those. So these are slightly more advanced capabilities that you are not going to find in the smaller systems. The bigger systems are probably going to have a lot more capabilities that you can perform transactions right from your org chart. In some cases, they are going to be just view or reports. It's not actionable.
That's kind of an interesting feature, Sam, because there's a lot of visibility in the org chart. And when you get into these companies that are, 5 and 10,000 employees, it's, it's very easy to lose sight of who reports to who does what, what are some additional resources we could pull on, all of those types of questions. So having access to something like this would be truly handy. And you could see just how massive of a lift that would be for a system.
Yeah, so here is the problem that we have seen. I mean, Workday was one of the best systems that anybody has ever created for ACM in general. Like, if you speak to 80% of people, they'll probably like Workday. But 20% of the people, they're not going to like Workday. Okay? And the reason for that is they feel there are too many layers. They need to jump through hoops to be able to get the information that they are looking for. By the way, let's not even talk about implementation. Okay. But when you require those capabilities, your implementation becomes harder.
Yeah.
People don't appreciate that. And then they are going to cut short the implementation, and then obviously they're going to have issues as well. So when you get into these fancy features, they look great on paper, but you need to invest a lot more time in thinking through your data and processes. And Dave, I think you like to preach about that, I guess.
I might have said that once or twice.
Exactly.
It gets back to, some of the other comments, customer, user comments that we've seen in some previous reviews as well. Things about not being able to undo transactions, and those types of things. I mean, it's the same concept in terms of financial governance is there for a specific reason. The more complex feature set requiring more complex integration, it's there for a reason for the companies that need those layers. So
yeah, the problems are going to be both ways. In general, sometimes that is training, sometimes that's the capability as well. But the bigger the systems, the more capabilities you are going to find in general. Okay, so I think we have already touched on this particular point that you are going to have the continuous updates for compliance and regulatory laws. For the most part, you probably don't have to worry about this because they are doing filing for you. Obviously, legally, you are responsible. So you need to know a little bit, I guess, but they are doing the major heavy lifting for that. That's a big deal, guys. That's very expensive process from the technical integration perspective. And again, this is a very Avalara centric business model. And when customers come to us, they we very rarely argue that you should never ever touch sales tax, you should never ever touch HR processes. These companies are really good at that. Go with them. That's a very heavy lift in general for any company. Okay, the rules are going to be slightly different overall from the ACM perspective. So the rules that you have in the ERP world are different, and that's where your user role modeling is very interesting as well. They are not meant to be one-to-one in general. The kind of structure that you are going to need in your ACM processes, it's very, very, very different. Just something to note, and I don't know if you have covered that in the previous sessions. These guys are talking about their multi-company capabilities, but this multi-company structure is going to be very different. This is more from the HR operations perspective. So here you are trying to consolidate all of your HR operations. Obviously, it is not going to have your customer vendor centric workflows. This is all employee centric workflows, but in that also you need to consolidate a lot. For example, let's say if you look at consolidated training, consolidated compliance for training, okay, consolidated recruiting. So depending upon which lenses you are looking at, here the lenses are going to be more from the HR perspective, that you need this consolidation if you want to find synergies across your HR processes. Again, depending upon how your organization is laid out. Now, you would think that capabilities such as search employees based on the first letter of their name. Now, this could be a capability or this could be a limitation as well. Okay, marketers are really, really good at presenting limitations as the capabilities. Okay, but we have seen scenarios such as when this is presented as the capability, sometimes it could be because they don't necessarily have the enterprise search, they are not necessarily cloud native, so they are doing slightly more regular expression is the term that is used for this kind of search. And Dave Slesta, if you're not familiar with that, so in the traditional systems, that's how they used to search. Okay, but now with enterprise search, sometimes you need that, sometimes you don't, depending upon how your search processes are laid out. So in this particular case, they are trying to show, but I don't know whether this is a real feature or it is a limitation from the old technology. So pay attention to that when they present these things. Preferred name and gender. Now, you might think that this is probably going to be just a custom field that you can create, but you have no idea how intertwined your preferred name processes might be. And in the HR world, this matters a lot in general. If they are going to have a different name, and if you are either going to display that on legal documentation, then your filing is not going to go through. Okay, you are going to have issues with that. Okay, and if you are going to show their legal name somewhere, you are probably going to get lawsuit. I don't know if that is a thing, but there is a case that people care for these things, and this is very personal for them. So, and that's why most ACM systems, they have processes designed for that, and that's why they have highlighted this as a feature. So it's not going to be just a custom field. By the way, preferred name is still okay. Gender, you don't want to mess with that. That could be even trickier. The whole emergency context workflow, and again, these are very legal workflows in our mind. If you don't have those mapped out as part of your system, then you are probably going to have a lot of issues with that when you are going to have 5,000 employees. And if you have real emergency, then you probably need to have that. Again, these are very intertwined features. They are not meant to be just a custom field, which you can simply create a custom field and enable these workflows. They are very thick. W2, T4, 401k, RRSP calculation, elections, all of these workflows, and they are very, 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 very thick. And that's why the smaller systems are going to be limited only to fewer countries. They are not going to have support for every country out there. And that's why even if ERP systems claim that they can do HCM, they can do payroll, there is no way, even the larger ERP systems, they are going to have very limited functionality. And even if you're going to buy an ERP system for HCM capabilities, it's going to fire back, because they are going to highlight these capabilities and you are going to miss on the real ERP capabilities, but this is not going to work. So Dave, you have a point, question, comment? No? Okay. All right. So some more points here. Goals and competencies. Again, these are very unique HCM processes, features that are part of this, and they have very unique workflows depending upon how thick you are. Typically, HR folks have very thick processes how they want to track goals depending upon how your benefits are laid out. If your benefits are going to have any connection with your goals, then you are looking for far thicker processes, and that's where your ERP and HCM might marry, again depending upon how thick you are in those processes. In some industries, let's say you go to financial services, everything is connected because their compensation is driven by their HR workflows as well. So sometimes you might find HCM processes intertwined with your core operational processes or ERP processes. So that is something to keep in mind. But generally, goals are very touchy and feely. Yes, you are going to have that, but their home is probably going to be just inside your HCM system. They don't necessarily have the cross-functional workflows. Alerts for leadership actions, that's very interesting. And in my mind, that is a very enterprise grade feature. So this is going to be in cases when, let's say if somebody is not complying with the training, and because of that you have legal obligation and you need to take some sort of action. So this is happening more in the autonomous fashion, that they are going to get the alert that these are non-compliant people so that they can take action. Again, it's a fancy feature. I don't know how many companies use this, but interesting that they have. Now, clock in, clock out of shift. I think this point we had touched in the previous sessions as well. The clock in, clock out here is going to be your overarching clock in, clock out. Okay, this is not your job clock in, clock out, and the clock in and clock out that you are going to get with your ERP system, even though they might have these capabilities, but that's not going to work for you. Okay, because that does not track everything. That only tracks your time more from the production process perspective. Here, what you are looking at is your employee in time, employee out time from your facility, and how you want to comply with HR processes. Sometimes that might have input on your compensation, but generally that is not going to be relevant to how your production is going to work. So again, the HR perspective is very different from the clock in and clock out perspective. A lot of companies, they think that, you know what, they both are same, but and again, if you are going to use ERP for these processes, then you are going to run into issues, because there is going to be some more additional time that you need to account for other than what you are billing to your customers. So these two things are completely separate. Now, personal and team schedules. Now we are getting into the real HR scheduling. This is not necessarily your operational scheduling or field services scheduling. This is very different. Again, this is more from the HR perspective. In some industries, they both could be mixed. They could be same, but that is not always the case. Sometimes they could be different as well. So again, pay attention to that in terms of which schedule are you talking about. Are you talking about operational schedule from the, let's say, project management perspective? Are you talking about production schedule more from the production perspective? Or is it purely the capacity planning more from the people perspective? That's very, very, very different. Request time off, view approvals. Generally, they reside inside your HCM system. How you are going to incorporate that into your ERP system could be extremely challenging. Okay, and that's why you have some correlation between these two processes. If you are going to have two different data silos, you are going to have a lot of fun incorporating that inside your production planning. Any comments, guys? No? Yeah, the other points, and again, these guys have the in-house tax team. So these are tax experts that they have in-house. Very similar business model as your Gusto and Avalara that we have been talking so far. And again, you are not going to get that with your SAP or Oracle. So these are very unique capabilities. Now, when you get into these EEOC compliance scenarios, that's very interesting, and that's where you are getting into the whole recruiting workflow and how recruiting workflow is going to marry with your HR workflow. So you need to track all of that. Generally, that is not going to be cross functional. The home for that is probably going to be inside HR department. So the right place for that is going to be your HR or recruiting system. Most systems are probably going to have that, even the smaller ones, and UKG definitely has that. Now we get into the real compliance, okay? And here, even if you're going to look at GDPR is going to be far more serious, because you are dealing here at the employee level, you are dealing at the individual level. So your GDPR compliance is going to be far more serious than what is going to be in the ERP world. ERP sort of knows your resource, but it does not know as much. Here you have the real personal information that you need to protect. So when you talk about compliance issues such as your HIPAA, it's very different. It's far more serious here. So that's why the compliance is going to be far thicker in general, but they might not be as relevant in the ERP world. Just imagine how many different tax codes that they need to comply with. So they have thousands of tax codes, and each tax code is going to have its own requirements, how you need to file for that. Sometimes they might be bundled as part of one filing, but these are literally chart of accounts, and they might have their own reporting standards in terms of how things need to be reported. And if you are going to misfile, misclassify any of those, you are looking at thousands and thousands of dollars in penalties. And HR laws, labor laws, they are not forgiving, and they are very expensive. The whole veteran workflows, that's very serious as well. The larger companies, when you get to that 1,000, 5,000 employee level, at that time you need to comply with a lot more laws. In general, smaller companies, they care for it, nobody pays attention to them, so sometimes they might not follow all of these. But when you are going to be bigger player, then everybody's watching you, so things become far more serious. Some more things, for example, the newer things that you have noticed in their case, and they are far more detailed in these things you are not going to notice when you review marketing material of Oracle SAP. They are not going to talk about these things. For example, let's say automatic filing of 8,000 tax codes that we have already highlighted, deductions, contributions, QTD, YTD, payroll liabilities that you're going to find in some of the very small, tiny, weeny payroll systems, but generally the capabilities are extremely limited. Then you are going to have the employee portal where they need to manage their own preferences, but you sort of have the legal liability. So you need to make sure that the details that they are entering are going to be accurate as well. Otherwise, you are sort of paying them incorrectly. And that's when you see all of these issues in the news that people were not paid correctly when they implemented either HCM or ERP. Things are really serious there. And yeah, the whole salary changes, especially if you're going to have processes in the developing countries, the advance payments are very common. I don't know how to enforce that or control that, but some systems are going to have support for that. We saw that with Oracle Cloud ACM. Here we are talking about salary changes. The changes are going to be on a prorated basis. So there is a whole workflow for that as well. How that is going to go, depending upon how your appraisal process is. Smaller systems may not have support for that. Obviously, this is a mid-market system, so they have a lot more support for these things. Merit-based compensation calculation in local currencies, and now again, very complex workflow. Depending upon how you compute that, if you are going to have simplified process, your life is going to be easy. But if you have a very complex algorithm, it's going to be really hard to accommodate that. So our recommendation always is simplify your merit-based compensation, align that with what system is able to do, I guess. But these guys have that. That will require far more correlation between how your merit data is going to be and how your compensation calculation is going to be done. And then finally, how that is going to go with your GL inside ERP. So it could be very interesting to model that. The whole compensation plan assignment in mass, and again, that is driven by your HR titles, which are very different titles or roles that you are going to have in your operational organization. So for the most part, you're going to have some sort of plans. And when you are making any sort of changes in that, typically these one-to-one capabilities are not going to be there in these smaller systems. So that's where your mid-market systems are going to have that. So with UKG, you are going to find those capabilities. Now, if you have to make those changes at the employee level, you are making changes to 5,000 different profiles. That could be a much heavier lift in general, much heavier admin lift. So you are doing this at the plan level, but again, that will require implementation expertise. Dave, you have a comment?
Yeah, I was just going to add that a situation back to the union comment, a situation where they're agreed upon pay increases at set intervals, 6 months, whatever it is, 1 year, and to your point, 5,000 employees to have to go in to make that change. That would certainly be beneficial.
Exactly. And by the way, I mean, it's not going to be just 5,000 employees. Depending upon how convoluted your equation is going to be. Sometimes when you look at the compensation plan, they are going to have correlation with other data sets. For example, let's say if you are merit based, but merit based on what? Sometimes that could be product, territory, so you could have other variables. So how do you correlate that information? That's where
Yeah.
it becomes very complicated. That you are not going to be touching on just one variable for employee. It's going to be 5,000 times 100 different variables that are being impacted as part of your comp plan. Bonus pools is a very interesting piece of functionality as well. They have that. Stock compensation could be very detailed, very convoluted. If they don't have support for that, it's going to be really hard. In some companies, especially if you look at these startups, they have overly convoluted structures. Okay, they do whatever they have to do to survive, to be able to retain talent. But when you are going to be implementing that, inside the system, it becomes very tricky. Stock compensation is going to be very common in the professional services space as well. They have very complex employee agreements, partnership agreements. They have very different filing. In fact, I mean, if you look at the large accounting firms, consulting firms, they are trying to change their model because the model is so convoluted that the admin cost is going to be far more than the benefit that the model brings. So now they are trying to simplify their model. That legally they are not going to make it complex. They will try to retain the talent from the operational perspective. So it's changing, but again, it's very common in professional services industries. Wherever you are going to have talent, you are probably going to have some sort of stock compensation. The whole recruiting workflow, and I don't know how capable these systems are going to be from the recruiting perspective. You might have challenges there as well. Generally, ATS systems are slightly better with that, but these guys seem to have 3,000 different job distribution partners, and that's how many job partners you are going to need because attracting talent is very hard. If you ask any recruiters, it's a living hell to be a recruiter, to be completely honest, and it's a very underappreciated job. So the more automation that they can see in their workflows, the easier in general. So yes, there's a lot that goes in recruiting right talent, and they have very thick workflows. So that's where a lot of complications are going to be. So here they are integrated with 3,000 different job distribution partners. And again, these integrations you are not going to find with systems such as your SAP SuccessFactors or Oracle Cloud ERP, because the pre-baked integrations, they are going to rely on either consulting firms or third-party add-ons. So this is where the real value is going to be from the suite perspective. Offer letters, and I don't know how useful that is. If you want to keep that inside your automated workflow, obviously that is going to be much easier, but most systems are probably going to have that capability. UKG obviously has that. Remote policy compliance, I mean, I don't know how many companies really use that. If you are going to be pure play remote, there might be some issues around that. I don't know. I'm not really sure how strict laws are with remote work, but there might be issues. We have seen cases where, let's say, if employees were fired over phone or a video call, there's a potential for lawsuit, I guess. So that's where I guess, I mean, you need to figure out, okay, how the remote work setting is going to change your HR processes. And that's where I don't know if those processes are going to be pre-baked as part of these systems, but it seems like these guys have some capabilities there. The whole training academy, and I think this is the question that you had, Dave, related to LMS. LMS is going to be one of the module of these systems. So the larger HCM system, they combine pretty much everything from your LMS to benefits to your compensation to your compensation planning to your employee workflows, pretty much everything. Generally, in the SaaS world, you see all of these individual sort of plugins. They talk that they are the only ones who have those capabilities, but that is not the case. So this is where, when you are trying to consolidate all of these databases, trying to get one system, that's when you are going to need something like this. So now this is from a case study or a customer story. So this is Royal Farms. So this is very interesting, right? So even in this particular case, this is probably going to be agriculture. They are retail, they are not agriculture. So they have roughly what is to 230 store locations. All of the locations are in the US. So this is where you sort of draw the conclusion that they are going to be primarily in the US. Otherwise, with let's say SAP Oracle, in their customer stories, you are going to find global locations. So they have roughly what 5,400 employees. So obviously, from the employee footprint perspective, they are really big, but they are not going to have much of the ERP footprint, because for the most part the ERP role is going to be just GL financial reporting. It doesn't do much because the planning is probably done at the store level. The transactions are done at the store level, and the stores are simply reporting financial data for accounting. So they don't have much of the ERP play. They are not as mature in their ERP capabilities, but their ACM capabilities are going to be far thicker because they need to do employee planning for each of the store. So that's why they needed something like this. So here they are talking about UKG Pro Learning lets us create a powerful combination of in-store hands-on learning combined with easily accessible online training. So online training in general is a big deal with these store-centric industries or branch-centric industries, because the people who are going to be deployed there, they drive sales. And if they are not going to be trained, then obviously it's going to be a problem, right? So the whole training piece is very important. Employee feedback related to UKG Pro Learning has been extremely positive, which is a big deal because these guys care for mobile experience. Okay, and you are not going to find that mobile experience with legacy systems, and 90% of the legacy systems were on-prem. So this is definitely cloud native. So that's a big deal here.
Yeah, you think about that piece specifically, Sam. You think about the human capital required to do all of that training for a seasonal team coming in, and they're having to do that year after year after year. So I'm sure this was I'm sure this has been valuable for them. And the only other comment that I would have in terms of their ERP specific would be, inventory. This would obviously be a huge inventory lift for a company like this. So it'd be interesting to see what their system infrastructure really looked like.
Yeah, so for the most part, Dave, I guess from the system perspective, they are probably going to have something like SNOP, that is going to do their inventory planning. So they are not going to be as mature overall from their planning perspective. I guess the way ERP planning is done, the larger,
Yeah.
even larger retail, they have very small footprint overall from the consolidation perspective. I guess their financial processes are not necessarily consolidated. Their problems are different, right? So the point that you mentioned related to the seasonal workers in retail settings, every day, literally every day, you're going to have a new employee.
Yeah.
It's that bad. When you are paying $20 an hour, you can't expect much loyalty, I guess. So it's crazy the way it works, to be completely honest. So that's where the real problem is. That's why seasonal workers, not only from the licensing perspective, but the whole training aspect is very important as well. More comments, guys? Okay, let's review some more. So this is a bank, enterprise bank, and banks are going to have very similar processes as your retail as well, even though they are not necessarily selling physical products. So here they are talking about was using multiple systems to handle its complex HR and payroll processes for 970 employees. So again, the average employee size is much bigger in general. Its operations became increasingly challenging as the bank expanded into 22 full service branch offices. Again, the locations are from the US, so their presence is really in the US or Canada. They are utilizing it for HR, payroll, benefits enrollment, life events, guys. Okay, that process could be very thick as well. Recruitment they are doing inside this. Again, big deal, guys. Performance management, succession management, compensation management, and time management. So they are doing all of that. But time management, guys, this is only from the HR perspective. This is not necessarily the core, accounting from the job perspective, I guess. So make sure there's a real distinction there, I guess, between your time management, the way this is here versus what you are going to see in the ERP world. Do you guys want to go for one more slide or comment? We are 5 minutes away from our time.
I think we'd go for another slide, Sam.
One more? Okay. So this is also a bank. They have roughly 250 locations, and they have 5,000 employees. They send roughly more than 500 emails for each company manager, and the only thing that you were sending to them is just the HR data. Can you believe this? Now they have the instant visibility into that. So that's a big deal, guys. And they are doing a lot of surveys, and they are simply collecting data and sending to the branch managers. Yeah, so that's a real benefit in consolidating all of that. Okay, we can probably do one more. This is also very branch centric, but this is in healthcare space. So this is going to be your ambulatory surgery centers. And typically that is very branch-based operations in general, even inside healthcare. So they have roughly 1,800 physicians at more than 240 outpatient surgery centers across the US. Again, US centric case study here as well. And they were using multiple systems to manage their complex HR and payroll processes. So they got just one system to manage that. Okay. And these guys had audit process. They were able to cut by 50%. So the audit process, again, that's going to be very detailed in your employee process. And the only reason why they are able to cut down that time is because of that integration and the consolidation of the process. Otherwise, you are going to be doing a lot of hard work in consolidating that. So that's what the benefit that they got. I can go for comments, guys, if you want. Dave, do you want to start?
Yeah. I think this is probably one of the only reviews that we've done that has gone this in depth in terms of hitting its positioning with all of the support documents. And I think that really goes to say something about a solution like this. They know where they sit. They're fitting in their lane. They're doing the things that they need to do to solve the problems that their customers have. And I think so often, especially, and again, I've seen it everywhere, right? SMB to enterprise. But I think so often we're searching for that silver bullet, that solution, and we start picking those things out before, again, we're diving deeper into it. But I'm really impressed with how these guys have laid that out and have really stuck to what they seem to do best. So I was really impressed by that. This has been one of the few that I can recall that's been that focused.
They're really good. They're really good. There's no question there. Shrestha, comments? Questions?
I feel like this is very industry specific, and they have also put themselves in respect with locations very specific with US and Canada. And I think they are providing some advanced features with respect to human resource and like which I think many ERP solutions won't be able to provide. And since they are very industry specific, I think organizations which have a very high level of, human resource functionalities that they require, I think they can utilize this a lot.
Dave, any follow-ups there on her comment?
No, I mean, I completely agree. Like I said, really impressed by a lot of what they've laid out here. So
okay, amazing, guys. If you guys don't have any other questions, I'm going to have one question for you both. Okay, so Dave and Srestha, you guys have done Oracle Cloud HCM and this one. So in your mind, let's say if you were to give, let's say, 5 companies who are going to be better fit for both of these solutions, how would you do that selection? Dave, I'll start with you.
So you're really pulling on me in my brain fog to remember all of the details from the from the previous slide deck. So thanks for putting me on the spot with that.
Sorry. I'll give you a refresher if you like.
Yeah, give me a couple of bullets. And
the enterprise versus mid-market, I guess, is going to be the main variable, right? So for the enterprise, you are looking at the technical layers, the detailed technical layers, and the concerns that the mid-market companies are going to be they are going to have very different concerns.
Yeah, I think the easiest way to slice up the two outside of the enterprise versus mid-market, because a lot of the real differentiator there for me is, what's the problem we're solving for?
Yeah.
And I think these guys did a much clearer job of defining their sweet spot and provided case studies to back that up. I mean, every single one of those case studies was on point.
Yeah.
Multi-location, 100 plus locations. The smallest employee size was, close to 1,000.
Yeah.
But from a location standpoint, right on the money. And so I think the big differentiator is if you understand your process flow and you can tap into some of those pre-baked process flows, then, this would probably be a great solution, assuming you're the right size for that. If you need more complexity, if you have locations or plan to have locations right outside of the US and Canada, obviously there's going to be some more consideration for the bigger system. So it really comes down to where are we at today, where do we want to be in the future, and trying to define how those process flows are going to fit into one of these solutions. There's no there is no right answer.
Yeah, could not agree more. Srestha, anything to add there?
No, I completely agree with Dave. No more points there.
Okay, amazing, guys. So that's it for today. If you joined for the first time, this was part of our industry series for which we meet every Tuesday at 2 p.m. Eastern. So make sure you guys are going to be here next week. We are going to come back with another solution for the vendor. On that note, thanks everyone for tuning in today.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the WBS Podcast. Be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcasting platform so you never miss an episode. For more information on growth strategies for SMBs using ERP and digital transformation, check out our community at WBS.rocks. We'll see you next time.